Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered what goes on in the minds of people who've had a heart event? How do they cope with the emotional storm that can follow? This new study dives deep into that very question. Today we're looking at the Italian adaptation and psychometric validation of what is called the cardiac distress inventory. Now that sounds a bit technical, but think of it as a tool to measure how much emotional and psychological stress someone is feeling after a serious heart problem. So, this paper is about creating an Italian version of a survey, a questionnaire, that helps doctors and psychologists understand the mental worries and feelings that can come with heart disease. They wanted to make sure this tool works well for Italian speakers. Imagine you've had a heart attack or heart surgery. It is not just your heart that gets affected, right? Your whole life can feel shaken up. You might worry about your body, your future, your relationships, your ability to do things you used to do. All these worries and feelings together are what researchers call cardiac distress. Before this study, there wasn't a good, reliable tool in Italian specifically designed to measure this cardiac distress. So the researchers set out to fix that. Here is how they did it. First, they took the original English questionnaire and translated it into Italian. Then they had someone translate it back into English to make sure nothing got lost or misunderstood in translation. It is like making sure a recipe still tastes the same after passing it through a few different cooks. They also checked if the questions made sense to actual patients, and if the experts like doctors and nurses thought the questions covered all the important areas. They wanted to be sure the words were clear and that the questions were relevant. Then came the big test. They gave this new Italian questionnaire to nearly 300 people who had recently experienced a cardiac event. So these were people who had gone through things like heart attacks, bypass surgeries, or valve replacements. All within the past year, they got these participants from 2 different hospitals in Italy. Sometimes in studies, people don't answer every single question, or maybe a page gets lost. The researchers used a smart statistical trick called multiple imputation to handle these missing bits of information so they could still get a clear picture. It is like filling in the blanks in a puzzle carefully. Now, for the deep dive into the numbers, they used a technique called exploratory factor analysis. Don't let the fancy name scare you. Think of it as taking all the answers from the questionnaire and seeing if they naturally group together into certain themes or categories. It is like sorting a big pile of Lego bricks by color and shape to see what structures you can build. They were looking for the underlying structure of these feelings. They also checked how reliable the questionnaire was, meaning if you gave it to someone today and then again next week, would they get roughly the same results, assuming their situation hasn't drastically changed? They used a measure called McDonald's Omega to see how consistent the questions within each theme were. For example, if several questions were supposed to measure worry, did they all point towards high worry when someone was actually worried? They found that the questionnaire was pretty solid, with scores in the good to excellent range. They also looked at criterion validity. This is basically checking if the new questionnaire measures what it is supposed to by comparing it to other already tested ways of measuring distress. They compared it to things like emotion thermometers, which are simple scales asking how distressed you feel, and the Kessler -6 or K6, which measures general psychological distress. This helps confirm that their new tool is actually capturing that specific cardiac distress. Finally, they use something called ROC analysis. This is a powerful way to see how well a test can tell the difference between people who are experiencing high distress and those who aren't. It is like finding the best warning signal. They wanted to find a score on their new questionnaire that reliably indicates someone might need extra support or attention. And what did they find? Well, the questionnaire seemed to be clear and understandable to patients, which is great for face validity. However, the healthcare professionals didn't find the questions quite as strong in covering everything, which is called content validity. It's a bit like the experts thought they knew best, but to the patients, the questions felt okay. The most exciting part was the factor analysis. Instead of the original 8 categories from the English version, the Italian patients' responses grouped into 5 main themes. These were role change and adaptation to disease, social isolation, cognitive challenges, emotional overwhelm, and doctor. Patient, communication. This led to a shorter version of the questionnaire, with 42 items instead of the original 55. Some items were removed because they didn't load strongly onto any of the 5 factors, meaning they didn't clearly fit into the identified themes. Others were removed because they weren't contributing enough to the overall reliability of the subscales. But overall, the remaining items and the factors they formed were quite reliable. Crucially, they found a way to use this questionnaire to identify individuals who might be experiencing significant distress. They discovered that a total score of 26 or higher on the Italian CDI is a good indicator that someone might be struggling. This score has an 81% chance of correctly identifying someone who is distressed and a 74% chance of correctly identifying someone who is not distressed. That's pretty good for a screening tool. So, what does this all mean? This study has successfully created an Italian version of the cardiac distress inventory that seems to work well. It captures 5 key areas of distress for Italian heart patients, how they adapt to the changes the disease brings, their feelings of being alone, difficulties with thinking and remembering overwhelming emotions, and their interactions with doctors and nurses. Even though the expert panel didn't find the initial content validity as strong as they might have hoped, the fact that patients understood the questions and that the questionnaire correlated well with other distress measures suggests it is a valuable tool. The difference between expert opinion and patient experience is actually quite interesting. It highlights that sometimes what professionals think is important might not be the biggest concern for the patient, or vice versa. The fact that the structure changed from 8 factors in the original study to 5 in this Italian version is really significant. It suggests that how people experience distress after a heart event can be influenced by their culture. For example, in Italy, perhaps the idea of role change and adaptation to disease is a broader, more encompassing feeling than some of the more specific categories in the original. This is the so what part, and it is really important. Having a validated tool like the Italian CDI means doctors and psychologists can better understand what is going on mentally with their Italian cardiac patients. They can ask specific questions about these 5 areas to identify who needs help and what kind of help they need. For instance, if someone is scoring high on social isolation, a therapist might focus on connecting them with support groups or family. If they're struggling with doctor-patient communication, the care team might work on improving how they explain things and listen to concerns. Now, like any study, this one has its limitations. The researchers mentioned that the content validity wasn't perfect, meaning some healthcare professionals might still find certain questions less relevant. They also pointed out that the sample size, while good, could have been larger for even more robust findings. They also acknowledged that more research is needed to confirm these findings in other Italian cardiac populations and to explore how these distress levels change over time. This divergence from the original structure is a key area for future research. They need to really dig into whether these differences are truly cultural or if there are other psychometric reasons for the change. This could lead to understanding cardiac distress in a more nuanced, culturally sensitive way worldwide. Overall, this study represents a really important step forward in caring for Italian patients with heart conditions. It is giving clinicians a better way to listen to and understand the often unspoken emotional burdens these individuals carry. It's a reminder that when we talk about heart health, we can't forget about mental health. It is amazing how translating a tool can open up so many doors for better care. This research shows us that even when dealing with the physical challenges of heart disease, understanding and addressing the psychological distress is absolutely crucial for a patient's recovery and overall well-being. So, what is my take on this? It is a solid study that does what it sets out to do: adapt and validate a crucial psychological tool for a specific population. The shift in factor structure is particularly fascinating, hinting at cultural nuances in how people process such life-altering events. While the suboptimal content validity from the expert panel is a good point to note, the patient feedback and the strong psychometric properties of the final Italian CDI are very encouraging. Future research really needs to build on this, perhaps exploring longitudinal changes in distress and how interventions tailored to these specific Italian factors might improve patient outcomes. What about you? Have you ever encountered feelings of distress after a significant health event? Let us know in the comments below if you found this breakdown helpful. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more explorations into the fascinating world of psychology here at RUBIN'S Mind Lab. We'll see you in the next one.